Have you ever just wanted to sit down and watch a quiet movie, but everything turned into a live commentary session? I love my wife and daughter. I really do. But every time we watch a movie together, I feel like I'm stuck between the movie theater and a mild interrogation room. Have you ever felt like you just wanted to enjoy a movie completely, uninterrupted, without interjections, simply to sit down and immerse yourself in the story on screen? Me too. And then I got married, had a child, and everything became a family movie watching journey unlike any other. That evening, we decided to re-watch a classic movie I loved, Christopher Nolan's The Prestige, a film that demands focus, attention to every small detail to fully grasp the final twist. I had been excited all day, thinking it would be a relaxing evening, but as soon as the movie started, less than 5 minutes in, my daughter Emily, 14, turned and asked, "Dad, is that guy a bad guy?" Before I could even answer, my wife Karen gently replied for me, "No, honey, he's a magician. But later, you'll understand what he's hiding." I turned to look at them. Emily was nodding, but her eyes were still glued to the screen as if trying to catch every detail. Karen continued to explain in a low voice, as if she were a tour guide on a cinematic tour. "This is set in 19th century England. People back then believed in magic, but actually..." I froze. In my head, I just wanted to scream, "Can you guys just let the movie speak for itself?" But I didn't say anything. I sighed, turned back to the screen, and tried to focus. It wasn't long before a flashback appeared. Emily tilted her head and asked again, "Why is there suddenly this scene? Was it before? Or is it a dream?" And then, true to the familiar script, Karen spoke up again, this time even starting to analyze the characters' emotions. At this point, I was hardly watching the movie anymore. I was just listening to the mother and daughter's dialogue while the movie played like distant background music. It's strange that even though I felt annoyed, I couldn't really be angry with them. I knew Emily was young. She didn't have the patience to wait for the answers to unfold naturally through the plot. And Karen, she wasn't trying to disrupt anything. She simply wanted to help her daughter understand more, and perhaps she herself was unconsciously enjoying the role of commentator. I started to wonder, am I being too sensitive? Is their habit, however annoying to me, really that bad? Or am I expecting too much from a perfect experience and overlooking the enjoyment of imperfect moments, but with them? That night, we didn't finish the movie. I stopped halfway, using the excuse that I was tired and wanted to go to bed early. But in reality, I just wanted to be alone in silence, to untangle my feelings. The question kept repeating in my head. Why does something as small as explaining the movie bother me so much? And am I gradually becoming a man who no longer has enough patience for his own family? The next day, I decided to try a different approach. If I couldn't get everyone to sit still and watch a movie, why not choose a really easy to understand, simple movie? A light, family comedy that didn't require any interpretation or analysis, just laughter and enjoyment. I chose Paddington 2. I set out popcorn, prepared warm blankets, and called both my wife and daughter into the living room. "Tonight we're watching the Paddington Bear movie. It's really fun. Nothing to think about." I smiled, sounding optimistic. Emily's face lit up, and Karen winked at me as if to say, "Don't be so sure it'll be quiet." But they both sat down. Lights off. The movie began. 5 minutes passed. Peaceful. 10 minutes. I secretly rejoiced. No one said anything. 15 minutes. Emily giggled when the bear fell into the cake. Karen laughed too. I started to breathe a sigh of relief, thinking this time might be an exception. But then, "Emily, Dad, why can a bear live in someone's house? Isn't he a wild animal?" Karen, "Because it's a movie, honey. Paddington Bear is an imaginary character, but you know, there's actually a deeper meaning." I froze. For example, the way Paddington always maintains politeness, it reflects the kindness that still exists in a chaotic world. I turned, my eyes seemingly saying, "Seriously, honey?" But Karen just smiled, continuing to explain gently, as if she were in a film psychology class. Emily asked again, "Is that doctor a bad guy? Is he going to steal the real book?" Before I could answer, Corinne interjected, "Just keep watching, honey, but I think that person is hiding something not good." By then, I didn't know whether to laugh or cry. I hit pause, turned to both of them. "Guys, can we just watch the movie? Like, let the movie tell its own story." Emily nodded obediently. Corinne laughed. "I'm sorry, you're desensitive, but the movie is so cute." So I just said a few things. I was about to retort, but then I stopped, because I suddenly realized something. Perhaps in their eyes, watching a movie isn't just about understanding the story, but about connecting. When my daughter asks me, it means she wants to be heard. When Corinne analyzes and expresses her feelings, it's because she wants to share. She wants the whole family to feel something more than just finishing a movie and forgetting it. The annoyance in me subsided. I pressed play, telling myself, "Oh well, maybe this live commentary at home version is also endearing in its own way." And indeed, by the end of the movie, all three of us were laughing heartily, not because of the humorous plot points, but because of Emily's innocent giggles, or Corinne's involuntary "oh my gosh." So cute. There was something warm seeping through every little sound in that darkened room. I began to realize, maybe the problem wasn't with the movie, but with my overly strict expectations. But then, like everything in life, when you think you've learned a lesson, reality makes you learn it again. One weekend evening, when I just got home from work, Corinne had already prepared dinner and excitedly said, "Honey, tonight the three of us are watching Interstellar." Emily said she's older now, wants to try watching some brainy movies. I froze. Interstellar, Nolan's heavy sci-fi film that I had to rewind a few times the first time I watched it to fully understand. The movie with time travel, black holes, relativity theory, and love as a force that transcends space. My 14-year-old wanted to watch that. I tried to stay calm, forcing a smile. "Okay, but remember not to ask too many questions in the middle, because this movie requires concentration." Corinne patted my shoulder. "Don't worry, I've told her. This time we'll try to give you absolute quiet." I didn't quite believe it, but I still hoped. Hope is the most foolish, but also the most precious thing humans have. Right. The movie began. At first, everything went surprisingly smoothly. Emily sat still, eyes glued to the screen. Corinne said nothing, only occasionally breathing softly or smiling faintly. I started to think maybe this time it really is different. Then came the scene where Cooper leaves his daughter Murph, her choked sobs echoing. Emily's eyes reddened. I also felt my throat tighten. A beautiful emotional moment. And then, just as the main character began to explain relativity and how time slows down on a planet near a black hole, Emily tilted her head and asked softly, but very clearly, "Dad, so if we really go into a black hole, I won't see you anymore?" Corinne immediately turned, unable to hide her excitement. "That's not it, honey. This part means time passes differently in different places. For example, 1 hour here is like 7 years on Earth. So, when they come back," I raised my hand to signal pause, like a referee on the field. "Wait guys, just wait a minute. The movie will explain later. Let's just keep watching." "Okay." Emily shyly lowered her head. "I'm sorry, I just was a little worried." I sighed, then smiled. "It's okay." But Interstellar is the kind of movie where the more closely you listen, the more fully you can feel it. "Let's try it together." Corinne held her daughter's hand and nodded, and then we continued watching. Although there were still a few more questions and whispers afterward, I realized it didn't bother me anymore. Not because they changed, but because I changed. I no longer stubbornly wanted to experience the perfect movie alone. I started to learn to embrace imperfection, to accept unexpected questions, sudden comments, because those were signs of connection, of Emily's interest, of her trying to understand a more complex world through the screen. And I also saw something clearer than ever. My wife Corinne wasn't just an unpaid commentator, but someone who always tried to make her daughter feel safe, unafraid to ask questions, unafraid of not understanding. That night, when the movie ended and the credits rolled, Emily leaned her head on my shoulder and whispered, "Next time, let's watch Inception, Dad." I gave a wry smile, but inside, I felt an unusual warmth. Ever since that night watching Interstellar, I started to change my perspective on family movie nights. Before, I always thought watching a movie was a personal experience like a date between me and the cinematic world, not to be interrupted. But gradually, I understood. When living with a family, every experience, no matter how small, becomes a shared experience, and that, sometimes, is worth even more than fully understanding a movie. However, theory is one thing. Reality can still test my patience. One Saturday evening, it was raining. The whole family decided to watch The Martian together. I thought, this movie is good, easy to understand, humorous enough, and the science isn't too difficult. But I forgot one thing. Corinne loves to break the ice with off-topic remarks. Right from the opening scene where Mark was left behind on Mars, Corinne exclaimed, "Actually, the chances of surviving like that are almost impossible. But oh well, it's a movie." I turned to look at her, my eyes clearly saying, "Give the movie a chance." She winked mischievously. Emily then started making hypotheses. "Dad, if I were stuck on Mars, would you come back to save me?" I laughed. "I'd try. But I'd probably have to learn farming first." And so instead of just watching the movie, we started imagining of the Martian Family Edition. "I'll grow potatoes in Martian soil," Emily said. Corinne added, "Mom will send supplies from Earth, but probably with chocolate." I could only laugh. At first, I was annoyed, but then I realized this is the difference between watching a movie alone and watching it with family. Imperfect, but vibrant and full of affection. Thanks to these movie nights, I also started to understand Emily more. She has a rich imagination, but she's also often worried. Her questions aren't just about not understanding the movie, but how she processes emotions. When she asks, "Will I be left behind?" she's not just asking about the character. She's trying to test trust, connection. And Corinne, whom I used to jokingly call the family commentator, is actually someone who always tries to fill every emotional void for our daughter. She understands Emily needs explanations, not to understand the movie, but to feel secure in her thoughts. I used to be afraid of losing my personal experience when watching movies with them, but now I realize I've gained something far more precious, the feeling of belonging to a family where all emotions are shared, whether through laughter, random questions, or even those somewhat excessive movie analysis moments. At the end of the movie, when Mark returned to Earth, Emily held my hand tightly and whispered, "I'm glad they didn't abandon him in the end." I looked at her, my heart light. Yes, everyone will return home eventually as long as they have someone waiting for them. And I knew no matter how many times the movie was interrupted, for me, those evenings beside the two most special commentators in my life were irreplaceable. Since those family movie nights, I started to change a habit. Instead of just choosing movies to my taste, I began to look for films that all three of us could enjoy, not too complex for Emily to feel lost, but also not so simple that Corinne would get bored and talkative. And then, I discovered something wonderful. When I chose movies for them, I no longer watched it only through my own eyes, but also through the heart of a father, a husband, living within real frames my family. One evening, I chose the animated film Inside Out. I remembered watching it once before, thought it was okay, but wasn't overly impressed. But this time, watching it with Corinne and Emily, I saw it completely differently. Emily was especially focused. She followed every expression of joy, sadness, fear, then suddenly turned to me, asking in a small but serious voice, "Dad, do I also have buttons in my head like Riley does?" I looked at her, then at Corinne, who was smiling sympathetically. I nodded. "Yes, of course, everyone does, and every day, we're creating our own core memories." The answer might sound a bit textbook-ish, but it was true, because in that moment, I realized Emily wasn't asking because she didn't understand anymore, but because she wanted to understand herself. Throughout the movie, Corinne didn't say much either. As usual, there were just a few gentle sighs during emotional parts, or quiet hand holds when Riley was sad. And I knew, in her heart, she was also going back to her own childhood, or perhaps there were days She felt lost and no one commented to help her understand what she was feeling. When the movie ended, no one spoke for a few seconds. All three of us sat there, quietly, not out of boredom, but because we were sharing a gentle calm. Then Emily whispered, "I think I like being a little sad, because that's how I know who I need." I turned to look at my daughter, surprised to the point of being speechless. Karen wiped away tears, and I, for the first time, thanked the interruptions, the cutting questions, the moments of movie lecturing full of laughter, because all of those things had led us to this moment. I suddenly realized these movie nights weren't just entertainment anymore. They had become a bridge connecting the emotions of three different people in a family, a place where we not only shared the movie's content, but also reflected on things unspoken in our lives. If I used to think watching a movie means being silent to enjoy it, now I understand. It's the interfering sounds, the naive questions, or even the innocent spoilers that make every movie more memorable than its content. Because in the end, what matters isn't understanding the entire movie, but feeling what remains after the screen goes dark. From that day on, I no longer saw watching movies with my wife and daughter as a challenge. Instead, I saw it as a privilege, a very ordinary but incredibly precious kind of happiness. Because not everyone has a wife patient enough to explain everything with all her heart, and a daughter curious enough to ask small questions about the world and about herself. But what truly made me realize that came from a very unexpected moment. One evening, I came home late from work. It was raining heavily. I walked into the house and saw Karen and Emily hugging on the sofa, lights off, with only the dim glow from the TV screen. They were rewatching The Little Prince, one of my favorite childhood books, and the movie adaptation was also very gentle and profound. I didn't want to break that moment, so just stood silently at the door. Then I heard Emily ask, "Mom, when people grow up, do they forget they were once children?" Karen didn't answer immediately. She squeezed her daughter's shoulder gently, whispering, "Maybe, but if you hold on to something, a little bit of wonder, a little bit of love, then maybe you're still a child, just in a bigger body." I almost held my breath. At that moment, I saw myself again in Emily's reflection, someone who used to be annoyed when not understanding the content, but now was thinking about things far beyond the story. And I saw Karen's reflection, not just the movie commentator I used to label her, but someone who was teaching her daughter how to empathize, how to hold on to innocence amidst life's changes. I walked over, sat down next to them, and said nothing. Emily leaned her head on my shoulder, whispering, "Dad, you know, watching movies with you and Mom is much more fun than watching alone, even if you glare when I ask too many questions." All three of us laughed. I stroked her hair, and for the first time, I replied as gently as possible, "Keep asking, as long as you still want to ask your dad." From that day on, movie nights became a small but indispensable habit in our family. We didn't choose movies to understand everything, but to feel everything. Some movies were left unfinished, some watched twice to finish. Sometimes the whole evening was spent just arguing about a plot point, but every moment was full of connection. Now, looking back, I feel truly lucky to have an imperfect family, but one that's always real, full of emotions, full of laughter, and even those interruptions that make life more interesting. And I also learned the best movies in life aren't on Netflix or in theaters, but in that small living room where three very different people create their own movie, playing for a lifetime. No rewinding needed.